evening, everyone. Welcome to Turkish Cultural Center, New York. It's a great pleasure and honor to have you with us this evening on this occasion. As you may know, the Turkish Cultural Center is a non-profit, non-government civic organization which promotes Turkish language and culture in the U.S. Now, today's event is such an excellent event to promote Turkish language and culture. I'd like to say a couple of things about the exhibition, which was created by Katherine Branning. She is a lover of Turkey. She is the author of the book named Yes, I Would Love Another Glass of Tea, which talks about the Turkish culture and Turkish architecture in this book. Today's event is sponsored by the Turkish Cultural Center, New York, Blue Dome Press, and Selcuklu Municipality. Again, I would like to thank you all for being with us, and I would like to invite Suzy Tiele, who is a student at Pace University. She's studying economics, and also she is interning at the Turkish Cultural Center. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm pleased to tell you about our three photographers who are responsible for these stunning images that I'm sure you've started to look at. We have Ahmet Kuş, is the visual arts director to the Great Seljuk project sponsored by the office of the Turkish President Abdullah Gül. He received awards in several national and international photography contests. He has curated various exhibits in and outside of Turkey. He is also a prolific writer on issues related to photography and the history of Konya and the Seljuk Civilization. Fevzi Şimşek works as a producer in the Great Seljuk project sponsored by the office of the Turkish president. His photos have been widely published and exhibited in Turkey and internationally. He took part as a photographer in major albums like the Sile photo album, World's Mevlevi Lodges, and Mevlana, The Light of Humanity. Ibrahim Divarci also works as a coordinator in the Great Seljuk project. He has been a photographer for more than 20 years. His exhibitions have been on display in various cities in Turkey, as well as internationally. His photos have been included in prestigious albums including Mevlana, The Light of Humanity, Konya from Past to Present, and Anatolian Seljuk Heritage. He also writes in several publications in Konya. I would like to introduce you to Ibrahim Divarci, who will say a few words in Turkish, which will be translated by Ahmet Nalcıcıoğlu.
Değerli misafirler,
dear guests,
kendi medeniyetimize aşina olmak, üst başlığı ile 2003 yılında Konya Selçuklu Belediyesi ile başlattığımız projenin bir parçası olan Anadolu Selçuklu Eserleri fotoğraf albümünden seçilen fotoğraflardan oluşan sergimize hoş geldiniz.
I'd like to welcome you to our exhibition, which was a part of a project that was started with Konya Municipality in 2003, which was a project to get to know our own civilization.
Sergiye ciddi manada emek veren Katherine Branning, Blue Dome Yayın Evi, Türk Kültür Merkezi ve Konya Selçuklu Belediyesi'ne en kalbi teşekkürlerimizi sunuyoruz.
I'd like to offer our sincere thanks to Katherine Branning, who had serious efforts in the presentation of this, and Blue Dome Press and Turkish Cultural Center.
Selçuklu medeniyeti yaklaşık 1000 yıl önce tarih sahnesine çıkmış ve dünya, ilim, kültür ve mimarisine ciddi katkılar sağlamıştır. Bugün burada bu seçkin mimari örneklerinden bir kısmını görmekteyiz.
Seljuks have appeared on the scene of history approximately 1,000 years ago, and they have had serious contributions to the world knowledge, culture, and architecture. In this exhibition, we're only seeing selected samples of this civilization.
Katılımınız için teşekkür ediyor. Hepinize saygılar sunuyor. Hoş geldiniz diyorum.
Thank you for all coming by and enjoy.
And tonight's keynote speech will be given by Katherine Branning. Katherine Branning has degrees from the University of Paris, Sorbonne, and the École du Louvre, where she majored in Islamic arts and was a specialty in Islamic glass. A graduate at the Pratt Institute School of Information and Library Science, she has been a librarian at the French Institute of Architecture in Paris, France, at the French Embassy Cultural Services, and the Alliance Française in New York City. For her work promoting the French language and culture through the creation of numerous libraries in both France and the United States, she has been awarded the National Order of Merit from the President of France, one of the nation's highest honors. She has studied the Turkish language and literature at the Institute of Oriental Languages in Paris and with Professor Talat S. Hallman at New York University. As an independent researcher and glass artist, she has conducted annual fieldwork relative to the Seljuk architecture and decorative arts in Turkey every year since 1978. She has a website dedicated to the Seljuk architecture, www.turkishhan.org. That's turkishan.org. I would like to present you with Miss Branning.
Deus vult, God wills it. So called out Roman Catholic Pope Urban II in Clermont, France in 1095. A battle cry that launched the massive movement known as the Crusades, the series of 9 religious wars to the Holy Land. The entire world shall be mine, called out a barbarian warlord named Temujin, later to be called Genghis Khan. Raging forth from the far reaches of northeastern Asia, he and his Mongol clans vowed to brutally raze everything in their path to world supremacy. In between these two concurrent waves of destruction, one from the west and one from the east, was a moment in time, the 12th and the 13th centuries. A land called Anatolia, a nation built there called the Seljuk Empire, and a faith named Islam. Despite being battered by both sides in this war-ravaged era, the Seljuks managed to create an empire that flashed across the sky like a brilliant blue comet. It lasted only 200 years, but the Seljuk sultans of Anatolia led an exceptional period of politics, commerce, and art. They invited scholars, poets, artists, and mystics from all over the Islamic world to come to their glittering capital of Konya. They bettered the lives of their citizens by building schools, mosques, and hospitals. Their scientists and scholars stimulated evolution in medicine, chemistry, law, and astronomy. Trade and literature were encouraged. They created thousands of great works and set a national and Islamic direction for Anatolia, making it the homeland for other great empires to follow, notably the Ottoman Empire and the Turkish Republic. That is why we have called this exhibit the Song of Stone, the Heritage of Anatolian Seljuk Architecture. We wish to show you, through the example of architecture, the specific gift that was the Seljuk-era, and how its influence still sings strongly today. This era has often been overshadowed by the impressive Ottoman culture that followed it, and is even unfamiliar to many Turks, but it was a glorious period of civilization that deserves to be better known. I do not want to give you a detailed history or art lecture here tonight, but I would prefer that you discover this architectural heritage for yourself by looking at these exquisite photographs. The show is organized around the five main types of monuments built by the Seljuks, and informational panels on them and other aspects of the era will help you to better understand it. And to make it even more real, as a special treat tonight, we will have a concert of Seljuk-era music and a buffet of foods of the period. I would especially like to thank Hüseyin Şentürk, my esteemed and enlightened editor at Blue Dome Press, whose visionary mind led to the project that you see before you tonight. I cannot thank him enough for his insight, generosity, and lots of hard work. My gratitude to Blue Dome Press and the Turkish Cultural Center for the sponsorship of this, the first exhibit ever dedicated to the Seljuks in the Northern Hemisphere. And it is also an exceptional honor and pure joy for me to welcome my beloved Konya friends, Ibrahim Divarci and Fevzi Şimşek to New York. Hoş geldiniz değerli dostlarım. Although I do not wish to give you a traditional history lecture here, I do need to give you a little background onto the Seljuks. Just who were these people? Anatolia, or Asia Minor it was known in ancient times, or Turkey as it is known today, has been inhabited for 30,000 years. It has always been attractive to settlers, and it was no different from the Seljuk tribe, one of the many Turkic peoples called Turkmen, who began migrating westward from the Central Asian steppes in search of the proverbial greener pastures. The Turkish tribe of the Seljuks takes its name from one of their chiefs, Seljuk. The Seljuk tribes originated in the Central Asia area, corresponding approximately with modern-day Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and southern Kazakhstan, and began moving westwards around the year 1000. At about this time, they converted from shamanism to Sunnite Islam. The first Seljuk state, founded in 1040 in the area of northeastern Iran, developed into an empire whose borders were so vast, stretching from Central Asia to the Caucasus to India and to Yemen, that it was called the Great Seljuk State. Continuing westwards, an offshoot tribe of these great Seljuks of Iran pressed into Anatolia. This splinter group of Seljuks became known as the Seljuks of Rum, spelled R-U-M like the drink, referring to the name that the Iranian Turks called the lands of the Roman and Byzantine empires. Around the year 1075, after their victory over the Byzantines, the large-scale migration by the Turks into Anatolia began. The Seljuks gradually took control over almost all the cities of eastern and central Anatolia. Seljuk authority consolidated at the end of the 12th century around the capital city of Konya, the city of our friends, right in the heart of Anatolia. It was here, during the reign of the famous Sultan Alauddin Keykubat, who reigned from approximately 1220 to 1237, that the Seljuk realm witnessed tremendous commercial, artistic, cultural activity. After this zenith period of Alauddin Keykubat, in 1243, the Seljuks fell victim to that devastating war machine of the invading Mongols, to whom they became vassals. The wealth and the power of the Seljuk Empire declined, and the weakened empire finally dissolved around 1326. But the funny thing about the Seljuk of Anatolia is that we really don't know that much about them and where they came from, really. Other than the writings of 3 known historians, we have no other sources worth mentioning. Most of our information comes from a historian named Ibn Bibi, who wrote a political and military history called the Seljukname, but it's not all that reliable. There were 2 other historians who wrote very short texts. We have some dated coins and stamps, some diplomatic and literary texts, and some Crusader Christian chroniclers. They were very important, those fellows. And that's it. Furthermore, few Seljuk period archaeological excavations have been conducted, but that's changing now. So, in the absence of historical texts and archaeological information, it has been very difficult to produce works on the history, the economy, the social life, or the customs of the period. Perhaps we don't have many written sources about them, but what we do have for sure are these stones, and that is why it is so important to study them in order to formulate a history and ethnology of this era. But besides these stones, there is much more to the Seljuk story, for they left us many legacies. Let's take a look at some of them. A legacy of architecture. Let's start with those stones. During the Seljuk period, the arts were encouraged not only by the sultans, but also by court officials called emirs and members of wealthy merchant families. They sponsored the building of monuments that were noteworthy for their size, variety, and craftsmanship. In architecture, the Seljuks were fast learners, taking the design traditions of their Central Asian roots and then adding to them the lessons they learned as they crossed through Persia. The 4 Iwan courtyard plan, and Iwan is an open arcade around a courtyard, that they saw in Iran strongly influenced them and became the universal design plan for everything they built. To this mix, they added their own innovative decorative features, techniques, and building styles. The result is a powerful, gutsy, and brawny architecture, much like the steps it sits on. But these were not just pretty buildings to look at. What has always impressed me about the Seljuks is that they built for the people, not just for the sultans or the upper class or for faith. They built a judicious mix of religious and secular buildings. Today, Turkey continues to build, and the concerted plan for the development and the building boom of modern skyscrapers, subsidized lodgings, hotels, and universities shows the same will to put architecture at the service of the well-being of its citizens. A legacy of multiculturalism. When the Seljuks came into those proverbial green pastures of Anatolia, they were not empty. Anatolia did have empty, vast pastures, but also prosperous cities filled with people and tradesmen. Christians, Armenians, Greeks, Latins, Venetians, Genoese, Arabs, Jews, Persians, and Georgians. The complex existing political and ethnic makeup of Anatolia at that time thus comprised its Byzantine and Armenian Christian heritage, the Central Asian, Turkic, and Persian Islamic traditions brought by the Seljuks, and cultural contexts with the Mesopotamian Arab and European Crusader cultures. That's a lot to deal with. In this way, the Seljuk era reminds me much of America, and I suppose it was this will to create a nation from a people of diverse backgrounds that led me to be intrigued by them at the outset. The exchange and synthesis of these diverse, different traditions resulted in a widened worldview, which is vividly reflected in Seljuk culture, architecture, and art. Today, in modern Turkey, we see the same will to craft an identity for a country with a wide range of ethnic and cultural groups. Turkey is providing an effective and enviable social model for others to emulate, especially for the emerging countries of the democratic Middle East. A legacy of arts. The era of the great Seljuks of Iran was a time of artistic explosion, producing an astonishing array of some of the finest examples of high-quality works in all of the history of Islamic art, especially in metalwork and ceramics. The Seljuks of Anatolia continued this production of excellence in the fine arts. A particular flowering was seen in the use of colorful mosaic tile and glazed brick that they used on their buildings, which was used with very, very striking effect. Stone carving was also a specialty of the Seljuks, displayed in all magnificence on the monumental portals that they put on their buildings, which they poetically called crown doors, taçkapı. Figural imagery proliferated in the Seljuk period, notably seen on the Seljuk ceramics excavated at the palaces at Konya and Kubatabat. Yet the richest artistic legacy that the Seljuks have left to the world is carpets. The oldest surviving examples of carpets woven in Anatolia are believed to be dated from the 14th century. These 18 pieces were discovered in the Konya, Aladdin, and Beyşehir mosques at the turn of the 20th century and represent some of the oldest surviving knotted rugs. Their power, color, and clarity make them some of the most breathtaking rugs ever woven. Today, traditional arts craftsmen still tinker away in all the workshops across the nation. Modern ceramic artists have been quite successful in the reinterpretation of Seljuk designs in their works. Turkish women still weave the same patterns as their Seljuk foresisters. No tourist goes home from Turkey today without a carpet in his bags, woven with motifs coming all the way down from the Seljuk era. A legacy of economy. Anatolia is a natural crossroads, so it's not surprising that the Seljuks developed trade initiatives. Smart they were, those Seljuk sultans of Konya. They understood that by promoting trade and commerce, they could engender prosperity, which in turn could stimulate intellectual and artistic growth. They knew they needed to support trade and incoming revenue by encouraging the safe transit of goods throughout their lands. So they rolled up their sleeves and came up with a commercial plan with the same determination that they showed on the battlefield. This plan consisted in the repairing of roads, the building of bridges, and the sponsorship of a network of over 250 caravanserais, or hans as they are known in Turkish, which are roadside buildings to safely house traveling merchants and their goods. Imports and exports of all sorts from China to Venice flowed through the courtyards of these hans and in the booming bazaars of the empire, and made the Seljuk Empire very rich. Today, I believe that the so-called Turkish tigers of the current industrial boom in Turkey are none other than the great-grandchildren of the Seljuks. The Seljuk strategies of globalized markets, exports, free trade on safe roads and ports, and improvement of infrastructure are now putting Turkish goods on the world map. As Ataturk was often fond of saying, the Turkish people are hardworking and the Turkish people are intelligent. And I'm sure Sultan Aladdin Keykubat said the very same thing about his businessmen and farmers. A legacy of humanism and social welfare. Let's take the example of healthcare. Darushifa is the name of medical institutions in Islamic countries where patients were treated and students received a medical education. During the Seljuk era, healthcare received much attention. All types of medical and mental illnesses were treated in the Seljuk Darushifa clinics. There were pharmacies which ground herbs for treatments and water sound therapy rooms for mental patients. More significant in my eyes is not just that these architecturally impressive hospitals were built, but that their medical services were given without discrimination on the basis of gender, age, or religion. And hear me well, U.S. Congress, for free. Helping the poor and the ill is considered a pillar of the faith of Islam, and the foundation of hospitals was considered a significant charitable act. These acts of charity were formalized in a system called the Vakif. The Vakif system of establishing charitable foundations to found and run such institutions began with the Seljuks. The seed money for the construction was given by the Sultan or another rich patron. A foundation deed was written which laid out the instructions for the operations of the establishment. And after the construction, the ongoing expenses were covered by income-generating revenue, such as rental of bazaar stalls or hammams. More modest persons could participate as well, and many families donated income from their orchards or fields for the operation of these buildings. The Vakif tradition became very highly developed in the Ottoman era. Today, the tradition of charity and generosity continues on in Turkish culture and is an important societal element. The Turkish government has recently set up numerous hospitals in Somalia, and the outpouring of medical aid to the earthquake victims in Haiti and Wuhan by charities and individuals has been remarkable. Every Turk realizes his debt to his fellow man. The strong will to charity is based in Islam, but the organization of these services is a heritage left by the Seljuks. A legacy of hospitality. It is not just hospitals that were created by the Vakif system, but also mosques, madrasas, and especially khans that were sponsored by these charitable foundations. In each khan, every traveler, whatever his nationality, religion, language, or social status, was entitled to 3 days lodging with food, medical care, and other services, all at the expense of the state. Complete care for animals was provided as well. We are very lucky to still have the foundation deed for the khan built by the great Seljuk vizier Curatted in Bunyan, there's a picture of it over there, outside of Kayseri. This deed clearly enumerates the services to be provided to visitors, such as food and drink, 2.5 pounds of bread and a half a pound of meat per day, soap for washing, medicines, repair and replacement of shoes for both men and beasts, firewood for heat, and candles for light. Once again, all for free and all for guests. Today, the world-famous hospitality of Turks that Turks show towards foreigners finds its origins, I believe, right there in those courtyards of the khans of the Seljuk era. A legacy of faith. Originally shamanists, the Seljuks slowly started to convert to Islam on their march westwards. The Seljuks embraced Islam with fervor and became devout defenders of the faith. The coming of the Turkic people from Central Asia was a transforming event in Islamic history, for they brought ethnic, political, and intellectual changes to the Islamic society and faith. The Anatolian Seljuks re-energized the Islamic world due to their keen sense of social justice, strong leadership style, and their devotion to education. They encouraged religious life and developed a particular form of philosophical mysticism known as Sufism. These mystic philosophers, mostly based in Konya, notably include Ibn Arabi and Jalaluddin Rumi, now known as Mevlana. The Sufi concepts of divine love were synthesized by Mevlana into an exuberant expression of whirling dance, music, and prayer, which opened up a new horizon of religious thought. Today, the Turkish Republic, the only true democracy in the Islamic world, is showing that religion and democracy can live side by side, much like they do in America. Turkey is doing much to continue the legacy of Mevlana, to show the world an Islamic country that is activated by consciousness and responsibility, and above all, that is humanist. A legacy of education. The great Seljuks and the Anatolian Seljuks were firm believers in education. Specialized professional education was given in schools called madrasas. They're over there. A considerable number of madrasas were built in every city of the Seljuk Empire and were largely responsible for the refined and enlightened culture that flourished in the Seljuk era. It is said that there were 40 madrasas alone in Kayseri before it was sacked by those Mongols in 1243. In these Seljuk universities, students received education in 4 main subjects: theology and law, language and literature, philosophy, and sciences. Some 25 to 40 students were taken on scholarship and resided in each madrasa building, which combined a main lecture hall, study areas, and dorm rooms, and as such was a mini university campus all under one roof. Today, the Seljuk heritage of providing educational opportunities for people in advanced education continues. In recent years, Turkey has witnessed the opening of an impressive number of private and public universities. Young Turks realize that education is the cornerstone of a developed society and the basis of a true democracy, and eagerly seek it out. Last year, the 10th largest group of international students coming to study in American universities was the Turks, and both Turkey and America are all the richer for it. A legacy of literature. Turkish literature during the Anatolian Seljuk period developed along 2 distinct lines: the divan, or classical literature, drawing its inspiration from Arabic and Persian languages, and Turkish folk literature, which remained deeply rooted in the Central Asian traditions. Konya, in the 13th century, saw the birth of one of the crowning glories of classical Persian literature, the Masnavi of Mevlana. Mevlana is now considered the greatest poet of Sufi mystic literature in the world. The Masnavi consists of 6 volumes and almost 26,000 couplets of some of the most exquisite mystical verse ever written. The text itself is an expose of his mystical approach to the world, punctuated by a series of anecdotes and quotations from the Quran. Persian may have been spoken in the court and expressed in classical literature, but the common man on the street spoke Turkish, which was now ready to bloom into a literature of its own right. The final years of the Seljuk Empire saw the arrival on the literary scene of Yunus Emre, one of Turkey's most beloved poets. Little is known about this legendary Sufi mystical poet who played the greatest role in the formation of Turkish as a literary language. In words pure and simple, he expressed the complex beliefs of Islamic mysticism to a broad audience. Today, there's probably not one Turk alive who cannot recite by heart or sing an emotional verse by Mevlana or a stirring poem by Yunus Emre. In fact, the whole world now recites Rumi, as he has become a household name in the West thanks to the many translations of the Masnavi into European languages. A legacy of food. The sophisticated gastronomy that developed during the Seljuk era was one window onto the rich tastes and smells of the 13th century Konya. Food is especially important in the traditions of the Mevlevi dervish order. Countless couplets in the Masnavi refer to food, which is often used by Mevlana in an allegorical fashion to explain the elevated concepts of Sufi philosophy. The intimate workings of the Mevlevi dervish order, their codes, initiation rituals, and daily life revolved around the kitchen and the table. For example, if a person was interested in entering a dervish lodge, becoming a dervish, he was asked to sit for 3 days on a fur pelt at the left-hand side of the kitchen entrance and just observe the goings-on of the kitchen. If after this, the candidate still wanted to persevere, He would then begin his 1001 trial period working in the Sufi kitchen. Repeating the same menial tasks over and over again allowed the dervish leaders to test the patience and forbearance of the novice. In Konya, the path to enlightenment begins with the peeling of vegetables. The Konya kitchen was highly influenced by Persian foods such as pilavs and grilled fowl, but nonetheless retained its nomadic Turkmen traditions of griddled breads, hearty soups, and roasted kebabs. Seljuk food traditions were later absorbed by the Ottoman cuisine, as many of the palace cooks followed the Sufi order. Coffee, which came to be strongly associated with Istanbul in the 16th century, entered Turkey by way of the Seljuks. Today, many of the classic dishes beloved by Turks come to us directly from the Seljuk period, such as tandoor kebab, böreks, pilavs, apricot kompot, and tarhana soup, and we're going to taste some of them very soon. A legacy of music. In tonight's concert, we will hear compositions played on instruments that have come down to us from the Seljuk era. A particular feature of the Mevlevi order is that it was the first to make music a central part of religious practice, much as it is in the Christian faith. Instruments such as the reed flute, the ney, the drum, the kudum, and the long-necked lute, tambur, were used in Mevlevi ceremonies and are still played by musicians all across Turkey today. Lastly, and surely the most important legacy, the legacy of love. The mystics of this era, notably Ibn Arabi and Mevlana and his circle, founded a philosophy that aimed to unite people in love, respect, and tolerance. No official or sole intercessor was imposed as the path to God, but instead, the unity in each person's heart for God and for all beings in the universe was the guide. In friendship, faith, and building, the Seljuks created a brotherhood of the ideals of love, which they believed to be the means for human beings to attain truth and moral maturity. Going back to those vegetable peeling dervishes, what has always been interesting to me is that after his training, the dervish did not stay in the lodge, but went back home to live his life, to marry, and to exert his profession. They did not remain cloistered together like monks in Europe, but rather went out into the real world to spread the message of love that they learned in the lodge. And I can tell you that today, there are many such dervishes alive in Turkish society. Today, Turkish culture continues to be inspired by the humanist values of the Seljuk-era mystics based on love. Hospitality, family bonds, neighborliness, patriotism, and respect for others are the foundation stones of the people of this land. So, can you hear all of these legacies echoing off these golden stones of the monuments that you see in these gorgeous photos? In conclusion, the Seljuk respect for civility and dialogue and the creation of an atmosphere of morality, tolerance, and cultural development are all goals we continue to strive for in today's world. We can say with certainty that the Seljuks established a sense of identity for the Turks, gave them confidence to be generous with foreigners and to share their food, land, and culture freely. They created a confident and positive people. How proud the Seljuk sultans would be today to see that their kingdom continues to be woven like one of their fine carpets, and that their brilliant blue comet is still streaking across the skies over this land called Anatolia. The keystones of the Seljuk spirit: humility, tolerance, humanity, and fraternity, shine brightly in the soul of their stones, their literature, their culture, and yes, even their table, and offer the contemporary world a privileged view onto a peaceful and loving face of Islam. Come, let us continue to sing their song. Thank you.
So now we're going to have a Sufi music concert, so just bear with us while the musicians take the stage. Thank you.
The members of the Chestnut Ridge Musical Assembly. We've been practicing for a short period of time as a group, but as individuals we have been performing for a while in the United States. Our group is formed of professional and amateur musicians. When I say amateur, it doesn't mean that they take it lightly. It's just that it's not that their primary job.
Bu fotoğraf çekti.